And so I want to share this theory with you, and it's way out there. So I ask you to have a critical but open mind for the next 14 minutes, because you might not actually be what you think you are. So who am I? All right, I'm a human being, and I'm 33 years old. But if you take a microscope and you look at any part of me, you see cells. And I'm a community of 50 trillion cells doing a magic dance. And you look at any one of those cells with an even closer microscope, and you see 20 trillion atoms. And so I'm also a community of 1,000 trillion atoms. But when you look at those atoms really up close, they fade away, and all you see is energy. And 13.7 billion years ago, at the Big Bang, everything that we've ever found in the entire universe was one infinitesimal, undifferentiated, pure energy. All of us are energy. A human being is a very complex pattern of energy. So I stand here as a 33-year-old, basically motionless, but when you look up close at any single part of me, I'm moving the speed of light, and I'm the age of the universe. So the question for me is, I know this conceptually. Why don't we feel it? Why do we walk around and we're so sure that we're a human being all the time, and we never feel like we're energy because it sounds awesome? And I think the reason that we don't notice it is because we are so distracted by the human levels of our experience that we fail to notice what is always sitting beneath.
Now, in the comments or end credits, depending on where you're watching this, I posted links to a TED Talks video by Garrett Lacey, a particle physicist who tells us of an amazing discovery in the scientific field. I want to show you and talk about his findings.
It turns out there's a lot we can learn from coral. A coral is a very beautiful and unusual animal. Each coral head consists of thousands of individual polyps. These polyps are continually budding and branching into genetically identical neighbors. If we imagine this to be a hyper-intelligent coral, we can single out an individual and ask him a reasonable question. We can ask how exactly he got to be in this particular location compared to his neighbors. If it was just chance or destiny or what. Now, after admonishing us for turning the temperature up too high, he would tell us that our question was completely stupid. These corals can be kind of mean, you see, and I have surfing scars to prove that. But this polyp would continue and tell us that his neighbors were quite clearly identical copies of him, that he was in all these other locations as well, but experiencing them as separate individuals. For a coral, branching into different copies is the most natural thing in the world. Unlike us, a hyper-intelligent coral would be uniquely prepared to understand quantum mechanics. The mathematics of quantum mechanics very accurately describes how our universe works, and it tells us our reality is continually branching into different possibilities, just like a coral. It's a weird thing for us humans to wrap our minds around, since we only ever get to experience one possibility. This quantum weirdness was first described by Erwin Schrödinger and his cat. The cat likes this version better. In this setup, Schrödinger is in a box with a radioactive sample that, by the laws of quantum mechanics, branches into a state in which it is radiated and a state in which it is not. In the branch in which the sample radiates, it sets off a trigger that releases poison, and Schrödinger is dead. But in the other branch of reality, he remains alive. These realities are experienced separately by each individual. As far as either can tell, the other one doesn't exist. This seems weird to us because each of us only experiences an individual existence, and we don't get to see other branches. It's as if each of us, like Schrödinger here, are a kind of coral, branching into different possibilities. The mathematics of quantum mechanics tells us this is how the world works at tiny scales. It can be summed up in a single sentence. Everything that can happen does. That's quantum mechanics. But this does not mean everything happens. The rest of physics is about describing what can happen and what can't. What physics tells us is that everything comes down to geometry and the interactions of elementary particles. And things can happen only if these interactions are perfectly balanced.
Okay, so Garrett has discovered that by examining coral, they found that each coral head has thousands of different polyps. These polyps are constantly budding and branching into genetically identical neighbors. Through performing heat experiments on these polyps, they were able to find that every single polyp is part of a whole, a single unit of being, but each one is experiencing its own reality individually. From their findings with the coral, they were able to look at quantum mechanics. See, the mathematics of quantum mechanics shows us exactly how our universe works. And we see that everything in the reality is just continually branching into new possibilities, just like the coral. As humans, we are individually experiencing only one of these possibilities, much like the individual polyps. What physics is telling us is that everything comes down to geometry and the interactions between elementary particles. Things can happen only when things are perfectly balanced. So Garrett starts showing us some subatomic particles and the things that make up electrons and protons and neutrons. We always consider these to be the smallest particle, but we never think about what's creating them. Garrett demonstrates to us how the particles that create point particles really work. He shows that when you plot them out in how they move, this is what they look like. At the tiniest scales of the universe in how it works is very beautiful. Now, look at this. This is one of the ways that these charges branch off from each other. As you can see, it flows in a hexagonal pattern, the same pattern that we found in the expanded flower of life. Then, if you rotate this pattern in 6-dimensional charge space, you see it forms yet another pattern. Many of you will recognize this as the shape of the Star of David, but its true name is the star tetrahedron, which maps perfectly over the fruit of life. This entire pattern created by the particles is mapped across over precise places on a 200-dimensional spherical shape scientists have called E8, of which also has a geometric shape. By rotating that shape as well, you can see how there are nearly infinite possibilities as to how these elementary particles interact with each other. The details of the reality begin to take form. Now, as this shape is rotating in 8 dimensions, you can see a myriad of different patterns here. Look at this one in particular. This looks a lot like Metatron's cube, doesn't it? At the heart of particle physics is pure, beautiful geometry. By now, you probably can begin to see where sacred geometry falls into this. Where do these shapes originate? Do they just come into being at random? Or does the first shape come from somewhere else? In Lesson 6, we talked about the flower of life, the original, perfect geometric symmetry that created the universe. This shape, as we learned, is not only the root of all mathematical proportion, light, the platonic solids, but is also the source of every musical system in the universe, including systems both used and unknown to modern man. It is also the source of energy patterns and, well, everything. It all comes from the flower of life. I believe this is what is at the heart of what's forming every subatomic particle formation, and it probably goes at least a few levels deeper than what Garrett is showing us.
That's what a Melchizedek is. There's lots of Melchizedeks. In this galaxy, there's about 10 million. But it's only one level of consciousness that everybody's connecting to. So the physical form doesn't matter what you look like, it's the consciousness level. And in order to be of assistance from a Melchizedek point of view, I had to remember exactly where I came from and why I'm coming here. So I remember.
What would you say your role is here on the planet? Why did you come back?
It's the same role with every Melchizedek that goes into any planet. What happens is a person begins close to the source and then begins living lifetimes, and they start coming down into deeper and deeper and deeper into the densities. And then when they get as deep as they can feel that they can possibly go, then they go back up. So we're talking about, everybody here is talking about ascension, moving higher.
Yeah.
But the higher beings have been coming down. They're going through descension, coming down to here.
Yeah.
And then once you've been through all those dimensional levels doing that, and you come back up and go through them again on another level, you get to the top, you have a choice. You can either go beyond this existence and back to the source, or you can take another trip around. And I chose another trip around. And when you do that, life says, aha, you're a Melchizedek. Okay, so you know how to go into all those dimensional worlds and be stable. So they use you to, whenever a planet or a sun or an area or even a galaxy or anything has a problem in their dimensional levels, they send Melchizedek because we know how to deal with those things. And you are having a hard time here getting from 3rd dimension to the 4th dimension. You don't know how to do it. The Mayans just remembered only about 2 months ago. And they had forgotten how to do it, and they're pretty good at it.
Each coral head consists of thousands of individual polyps. These polyps are continually budding and branching into genetically identical neighbors. If we imagine this to be a hyper-intelligent coral, we can single out an individual and ask him a reasonable question. We can ask how exactly he got to be in this particular location compared to his neighbors. If it was just chance or destiny or what. But this polyp would continue and tell us that his neighbors were quite clearly identical copies of him, that he was in all these other locations as well, but experiencing them as separate individuals.
And that every single polyp is part of a whole, a single unit of being, but each one is experiencing its own reality individually.
There's lots of Melchizedeks. In this galaxy, there's about 10 million. And but it's only one level of consciousness that everybody's connecting to. So the physical form doesn't matter what you look like, it's the consciousness level.